Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm doing my last video for 2024, and it is my stats video. This is where I go through all the kind of nerdy bookish details of what I read this year. I basically have this huge spreadsheet. It's where I track all this data. I will admit that I tend to spend the last 2 weeks of the year filling out the things that I didn't do during the year, and that's one of my goals this year is to maintain this, on a proper basis. As opposed to doing it all at the last minute. We will see if that actually happens. I don't know. But first of all, before I get into the actual fun stuff, I want to show you this little craft that I made. So I mentioned this earlier. There was a sad thing that happened in June when this was halfway done. My sisters and I went away for the weekend, and I appear to have left it there at the place, the Airbnb. And apparently they couldn't find it. I bet the cleaning person just threw it away. But I made another one. So this is all the books I read this year in a cross stitch. Isn't it cute? I think it's so much fun. So I basically color coded it based on genre. So I'm trying to make it look straight here. And it had some little details. I had the year on the top. So then I'm going to make a 2025 one on this side. I don't know what I'm going to do with these when they're done. Maybe I'll make a little thing in my office and frame them. I don't know, or just throw them away. I don't know. They're just for fun. But anyway, I have a plan to do novellas skinnier this year and to make the genres a little bit more distinct. I actually had to rip out all of the light pink and replace it with, or light red and replace it with actual pink because it looked too close to horror, and I was like, what? So basically, yeah, I have dark green is regular sci-fi, light green is classic sci-fi, red is horror, purple's fantasy. I have some other genres there like lit fic and historical fiction, romance and stuff like that. So they're the ones that have kind of a pattern, means that there's two genres. So if it was a sci-fi romance, it would be green and pink. So I think that's fun. Gives it something. It gives me something to do. Not like I don't have not like I have time to do anything. But anyway, I really like this little craft. So anyway. Into my actual stats. So the first thing I have is how many books did I read per month. I had 8 books in January, I had 10 in February, 9 in March, 7 in April, 9 in May, 8 in June, 9 in July, 7 in August, 8 in September, 11 in October, 8 in November, and only 5 in December. So the thing with December is that I read a lot of books that I'm going to review earlier in the year, kind of the last 2 weeks, and I film this thing, at least a week before the end of the year. So it's not 100% accurate in that regard, but it kind of evens out because then those count as my January reads. So and then this happens every year, so it evens out. So on average, it looks like I'm reading around 8 books per month, which is pretty good. So the next category is, I don't have a chart for this one, but I read 30,798 pages, apparently, according to the page counts on Goodreads. Obviously, some of this comes from audiobooks, and I just used the page number that they provided there. So that seems pretty cool. I can't remember what I did last year. I didn't write it down, and I didn't rewatch the video from last year to compare. But it's not really like a competition with myself. I just kind of do this because I think it's interesting. I didn't even tell you, I read 99 books this year. Technically, I read 100, but there was a book that I did not include in the list because it was a really, really bad, smutty book. I didn't really want to review that. I read it because I was curious, and I got it for $1, and it's exactly what you think it is, and it was entertaining, I'll tell you that. Anyway, so I'm just going to go with the 99 books. So of these books, 86 were not Canadian, 12 were Canadian. I was like, really, that's it? One per month Canadian? I thought I read more Canadian authors. Technically, it's 12.5 because there was a book by 2 authors. One was Canadian, one wasn't. So I gave them a half point. So yeah, I thought that was kind of fun. I like to support my country sometimes. Next is novellas versus regular books. This one, apparently the title is chart title. Yeah, I'm not doing this for money, guys. I read 16 novellas and I read 84 non-novellas. I don't know why this one's in percentage. So in terms of page counts, longest versus shortest, the shortest book I read was 92 pages, and that was Widow Fantasies, and the longest was 714 pages, and that was Children of the Black, which was a self-published sci-fi. The average book size for me, I guess, is around 310, 312 pages, so that's pretty good. That's kind of what I like my books to be. I'm more of I'm fond of a good 300 pager. I like a novella, and I like a long book once in a while, but really, if I see a book's 450, I'm kind of I don't know. So next is book formats. So for audiobook, that's 12%. Audiobook ARC is 1% because I got one book as an audiobook ARC. 2% are paperback ARCs. I only got a couple of those. 13% are paperbacks in general. 10% are mass market paperbacks. These are these little, these little tiny things like these. 14% are ebooks. And 46% are ebook ARCs. 2% were hardcover, and I think that's it. Yeah, so obviously the biggest here is ebook ARCs. Almost half the books I read were ARCs, and they were ebooks, which is good for me because that means I'm saving some money. In terms of years published, we have 62 books were published in 2024, mainly because most of these were ARCs. I think all of them were ARCs. 13 were 2023, 3 were from 2022. I had 4 from 2019 for some reason, and then the rest were all just one book. I have a whole bunch I have 2 books from the 60s, 4 from the 70s, 3 from the 80s, a couple from the 90s. And those were all the classic sci-fis that I like to read. That was kind of interesting. Not as interesting as when I didn't read ARCs, because then I had like a spattering of books. I'd always have like a few from like the 1800s as well, and that's one of my goals for next year too, is to read a couple more classic books. I love Victorian domestic fiction. I love books from the 1800s. I just I'm so inundated with ARCs that I need to like make space in my reading schedule for older books that I really enjoy reading. So definitely a goal for next year. And next is where I get my books from. As you could probably guess, 45 of them I got from NetGalley, because that's how many books I got from NetGalley. I got 5 for free from the SPSFC as a judge. I got 1 from Random. I don't know what that means. I got 1 from Book Sirens, which is kind of like NetGalley for self-published books. I got 1 that was a loan to me. 3 were from the library. 13 were from the publisher, which was really nice of them. 1 from Libby, which is like the ebook library version. I got 5 from the author, and I got 10 from a used bookstore. So I think that's pretty good. I think Random was actually supposed to be Amazon, because I know I bought 1 book on Amazon. Well, that's not too bad. Next was the book a series or a standalone. So as you can see, most of the books were standalones. 67 of them were standalones. 2 were prequels. 17 were book 1. Of those 17, only 9 of those I would consider actually going forward with this series. 10 of them were a book 2 in the series, and I finished all of them, or the books were finished at book 2. And then 3 of them were a book 3, which I think for all of them is a finale, probably. I clearly prefer standalone books to to series. Next we have stars given. So I don't really talk about my stars on when I do the review, because I find that very arbitrary. Sometimes I'll say, I would definitely give this book 5 stars, just kind of like belabor the fact that I really enjoyed it. Or sometimes I'll say, this is like a 2-star book for me, because I really want to explain that I don't like it, because as you know, I'm a very high ranker. I will say, of all the books, obviously I gave 49 of them, I would give 5 stars. I'd give 25 of them, I gave 4 stars. I gave 18 3 stars, and I gave 7 books 2 stars. I don't do for DNFs unless the book is like super problematic in the sense that it's very racist or extremely sexist or homophobic. I don't give less than 2 stars. I just don't feel the need to do that. I don't know. It is a very arbitrary thing, and it's just kind of like some people are very, very stringent on their stars, and they think stars are the end all and be all, and that's fine. Like, you can do whatever you want. For me, I just find stars are kind of like a little benchmark. They don't really matter. They're just kind of fun to look at. But yeah, I definitely, half the books I read this year I really, really loved. In terms of publisher types, I read 13 books from independent authors, from self-published authors. I read 35 books from small presses, which I'm really happy about because I really like to support small press. I think small press is amazing. I think it's where you get kind of the most interesting and innovative ideas. A lot of small presses aren't afraid to take risks on books that are weird or interesting. So I was very, very happy to see that I was kind of keep my goal of reading a lot of small presses this year. And then just over half of them were big presses. Again, a lot of these were from NetGalley. NetGalley is expensive. So, I mean, a lot of the small presses also don't always put their books on NetGalley. So I try to I try to buy books from small presses if I'm going to buy books, or find them from the library if I can to support them. In terms of publishers, the number one number was one-offs, which is just like kind of one like, for example, Titan, I only read one book from Titan this year, and so it falls in the one-offs, but it's also things like small presses that only pump out like 8 books per year, one of those, things like that. But independent authors, obviously, at 13, again, Angry Robot at 6, Tor.com for 7. Tor itself is 4. I'm pretty sure Tor.com and Tor are kind of the same company now. They're just like, one's like the imprint of the other, so I guess you could probably combine those. But all the other ones were kind of like 3s and 4s, 5 for ECW. I really love ECW Press. So hopefully they're putting in a lot next year. Genres. Here's the fun stuff. So I read 1 thriller. I read 5 romances. I read 2 nonfictions. I read 5 literary fictions. I read 45 science fictions. I read 11 horrors, 5 historical fictions, 1 gothic mystery, 22 fantasies, and 1 contemporary. So I also do like a breakdown by subgenre, but for fantasy, there were like 2 fantasy sci-fis, which I think are different from sci-fi fantasy, but everything else was like either very, very, very niche subgenres or no kind of subgenre, so I just didn't do it for fantasy, but I did do it for sci-fi. So for sci-fi, I read 1 action sci-fi, 1 comedy sci-fi, 1 each of eco, fantasy, mystery, horror, romance, short stories, weird, and time travel fantasy, or sci-fi. And then I read 9 classic sci-fis. I read a couple each of cyberpunk, of dystopian, of hard sci-fi, of thriller, of western, of none, which is, I guess, just space opera. But then I have another section for space opera, so I don't know what I'm thinking here. And then I read 4 post-apocalyptic and 3 literary sci-fis. So a kind of good mix here, I think. Classic sci-fi obviously dominates because I try to read one of those a month. Clearly I did not succeed at that. I only read 9, so I skipped 3 months somewhere. But space opera tends to kind of be the most... I mean, that's the easiest thing to kind of lump sci-fi into if it's not like a very specific genre like post-apocalyptic or like horror or things like that. I do want more sci-fi horror in my life, though. So next is something that I think is interesting. This is just kind of like... just kind of curious. I find this kind of fascinating. So, main character's background. So, either the main character's background... So, either the main character is like an alien, or their main character is not mentioned, or like there's some kind of like an animal person. I don't know. We have 13 of these. Then we have 54 white main characters and 32 main characters who are people of color. I thought that was interesting. And then in terms of the other demographics, mainly whether they're queer or not, we had 3 that wasn't mentioned or we weren't sure. 66 were cishet, and we had 30 that were LGBTQI+. I also looked at whether the world building was normalized for queer people. So I had 3 books where I couldn't tell. I had 54 books where no, but by no, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily hostile. It just means that either there's no queer characters in the book, or it's just like kind of like not mentioned. It's not included. Like there isn't like, for example, a secondary character. I don't know, like let's say like a random coworker of the main character who happens to be queer, like things like that. Like there's just none of that like included, and that's fine. You don't have to include all of that. I just think it's interesting to kind of look at that. Where 42 books did have that. Then we have the main character and identifies as, we had 2 main characters who were non-binary, 2 NA, meaning it was never mentioned, or I wasn't sure. 13 who there was like a mixed cast, so like there were a male and female main character, or there was a non-binary main character and a main character, things like that. 20 where the men were main characters, and 62 where women were main characters. Clearly I have a preference as to main characters, but I also tend to read books that skew towards women presenting people, just because that's who I identify as, and I like to, I find, while I do love a lot of books with men in them, I just read the Wager, which has only men in it. I still really enjoy them. I tend to gravitate towards books where there's a main character that I can at least relate to on that level. Compared to this, I just think it's interesting to look at the author's background. So if we look at what I read, there was 1 book where it was a mix of 2, a male and a female author. I read 5 books by non-binary authors. I read 50 books by women and 43 books by men. This is different from last year where I think I read 50-50 men and women. So I'm happy that I kept that trend. I like to support women writers and women and non-binary writers as well. And I think it's interesting if you look at kind of how many male writers I read versus how many main characters are women. So same as last year, I remember I read a lot of books by men that had women main characters, and I just think that's really a really interesting trend. Author background 2, which is basically the author's like cultural background or race. So 3 was unknown. 74, the author was white, at least from their picture. There are some, so there's a big margin of error for this, because from someone's picture, someone could be white presenting and not be white. Sometimes their background is not, sometimes people explicitly state in their background whether they're a person of color, as that's an important part of their identity, and a lot of the time people don't mention that. So there's a huge margin of error here. There were definitely 22 authors I read though who were people of color, just because of what they look like or kind of what their bio said. Also tied to author background is whether the author is a part of the LGBTQ plus community. So I had 10 who said that in their biography that they were, but there were probably a good 20 to 30 more who probably are. It's just they obviously didn't say it in their bio, because some people live in places where you can't openly say that, or maybe they just don't want to openly say that. It's also none of anyone's business. You don't have to stay in your bio whether you're married and have kids, for example, so you shouldn't have to say if you're a queer author either. So I just, given the settings or the characters, just like that, it's kind of like sometimes I'm like, okay, probably this person identifies in this way too, given the focus of their writing, but who knows, maybe not. So that's why I don't want to like make presumptions on that. I just think it's interesting. It's also for me too to make sure that I'm reading from a community that I feel, I like to be part of, and I want to kind of give back to that community by reading their stuff. And lastly, this is just something I thought was interesting. I didn't do this last year. So what was the point of view of the books that I read? I read 21 books, first person. Believe me, if I had known they were first person, I probably wouldn't have read them. No, I'm kidding. I like first person once in a while. First person for me is just really, really hard to pull off in a way that I really enjoy it. I often find it limiting, in my opinion. I prefer to kind of look at it from a step back and watch the people. Maybe this is kind of the anthropologist in me. I really like to see how people relate in groups as opposed to one person's specific point of view. So I don't tend to gravitate towards books that are first person. Some of these books obviously were on NetGalley. I didn't know they were in first person until I got them. So that's probably why, a good 15 of them were included in this. 3 books were switching from first person to third, things like that. And then I had one that is epistolary, which was a journal. And then 74 books were in third person, which, of course, if you follow my channel, you know that is no surprise. So I'm going to move into some stuff I think you might find interesting about my channel. So I started off January with 335 subscribers. Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everybody who's been with me the last few years I started doing this. I really enjoy it. I find it a lot of fun. I just love sharing my thoughts about books with people, because while I have friends that read, obviously, I don't see them as much as I used to. So it's nice to have someone to talk to, even if it's just my camera. Anyway, so I started with 335 and I almost doubled that. I'm at 665 now. So that's so exciting to me. That's so exciting. It's just like, it's really helpful for me too, because I don't do this to like make money. I do this because I love talking about books. But what's nice is that the more subscribers I have, the more likely I am to get ARCs from publishers and free books, and that's what I really, really like, is I love getting free books. It's just so much fun. So you guys subscribing really helps me do that, and so thank you so much. Thank you so much to Tuffy for always commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. You are so nice. Please keep commenting. If I miss any of your comments, it's because YouTube sometimes doesn't show me them. I don't know why. Same with Rod. Thank you for also commenting so many nice times on my channel as well. Thank you for your support, everybody. If you're curious of the videos that I posted, one that got the most views was the Book of Elsewhere. That was the one written by Keanu Reeves and China Miéville. This video got 1,292 views, which is a lot for me. Normally I'm sitting at about 30. So thank you, Keanu Reeves. Thank you so much, fellow Canadian. The next was The Ministry of Time. It's because everyone wanted to hear me recite that poem 100%. That one got over 1,000 views, 1,050. After that was The Mercy of God's book review at 568, and Absolution got 482. So yeah, I was like, okay. Sharkheart, still a book that I reviewed last year, is at 430, so it seems to somehow keep trucking. I guess it got on some lists, I think, early in this year, so people were probably searching for views, and I thought that was or searching for reviews, so that's probably why. In terms of most liked video, most of my videos get 100% because I get like 10 likes or whatever, which is fine. Videos I guess people disagreed with, there were a couple. Absolution got a couple dislikes, so it went down to like 91%. So did The Other Valley. The Book of Elsewhere, obviously the more reviews you get, the more dislikes you get too, so that was at 88.9. Generation Ship, someone didn't like my review of that, dropped that down to 83.3, but again, for that one it's like I've got 6 likes and 1 dislike, so obviously like the percentage is kind of skewed in that regard. The one that I knew I was going to get the least amount of likes for was The Time I Got Drunk and Married a Demon or something like that. That book I really kind of tore it apart because it's dumb, and so I got some dislikes on that one, but I was expecting that. I actually didn't get as many as I thought, because I did say, I'm like, this is not a book for me. I did kind of point out things I did like. It's just I didn't like the main character at all. I found him so annoying. So anyway, yeah, as I said, I've got some goals for next year. One is to make another one of my beautiful little cross stitches. The second is to read at least a couple Victorian novels, or at least books from earlier than 1900, or maybe even books from the 1930s, things like that, just because I miss reading those. I want to read a couple more of those. Some goals with my channel is I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, keep doing a couple books per week if I can. What was my other goal? To properly track these things. Because it's more fun when I kind of don't have to scramble at the end of the year and make these videos less polished than they could have been. Then again, I'm kind of filming this as I'm getting up and checking on a cake that I'm cooking. This is the worst time of year to be filming videos, and of course this is when I'm filming all of these videos. But anyway, I hope you have a wonderful New Year's tonight if you're celebrating New Year's. I'm not really, because I have small children, and it's the hardest time of year really to get a babysitter, which is fine. I've had my share of drinking parties. I think I can, take a few years off of that. It's probably better for my liver. So again, Happy New Year, and thank you again for subscribing and for watching my videos and for not posting super mean comments. In fact, I don't really get very mean comments at all, which is very, very nice, because I have some friends who are YouTubers and they get some terrible stuff. I get the most on my classic sci-fi, especially when I point out problematic stuff, but I expect that. So anyway, I'm rambling.